It's the medium, nothing in excess. The challenges of life, it's important then to see that there is no end to it. So on that level, life won't leave you alone. But on a deeper level, once you accept that challenges will come, you don't have to become negative when they do come. You can actually, oh, there's another one. And then it's often through intense challenges, the bigger ones, they drive you deeper. Now the interesting thing is, it's not the great things that happen to you that make you more conscious. It's in many cases the so-called bad things that happen to you, if you deal with them correctly and come to a place of acceptance, that make you more conscious. So there's an ancient saying, I believe it comes from Sufism, but I'm not sure, that says, when the ego weeps for what it has lost, the spirit rejoices for what it has found. And so many times you may find that in your life you lose something, death, loss of security, loss of income, loss of health, loss of a long-term relationship, these kinds of, when the ego weeps, because the ego weeps, it's terrible, but then something suddenly arises of something that had been part of your sense of self has been removed. It leaves a hole, an empty space, such as when somebody close to you dies, you lose your livelihood, your home. It leaves an empty space, which is painful from the point of view of the personality. And it is potentially also able to drive you deeper into who you truly are beyond form, the unconditioned. And then you experience suddenly, how can I feel so peaceful? Suddenly, if there's something bad has happened, and yet suddenly you feel a sense of liberation. It doesn't happen to everybody who experiences loss, but potentially that is always there. So next time a challenge comes, it won't be long. Then say, oh, there's another one. And then you go with it. You look at it. Is there anything I can do to change the situation? First, when you look at it, the first is always to accept the present moment as it arises. Now, sometimes whatever arises in the present moment requires you to take action. And then you look at it. Now, this looking is an important part of it. To look at a situation is not necessarily visual looking. It means to give attention to a particular situation that has arisen or is arising in the present moment. And then in this thing that I call looking is you give it attention. In that moment, it could only be a few seconds or a minute or two. You give it attention, and that is a very important thing. It's not, at that point, you don't think. If your thinking comes in too soon, you might come to very wrong conclusions about what action you need to take, because that action will be conditioned by your mind, the old stuff. You bring in the old and try to deal with the present moment by bringing in old conditioning. So you will act according to your conditioning. But if you can give something attention, this giving attention, you face it, you've let go of the inner resentment, and this is the most important thing. You've realized it is in the nature of life to give you challenges. And when they come, there's no resentment. You just say, there it is, another one. Okay. No, even if you say there's another one, you don't say, oh no, another one. There's another one, okay. And then you look at it, and by looking, I mean to be in that state of consciousness in which there is an alertness, but not yet thinking. You don't immediately, unless it's a situation that requires immediate action, which is called an emergency situation, in which case you'll do whatever you do anyway. Often emergency situations cut your mind out completely and something else takes over and you take action. And sometimes people do heroic things and afterwards, when they are praised by others, they say, I don't know, I just did it. And then others, it can happen that they become paralyzed in the face of an emergency. They cannot get out of their mind. And their mind doesn't have time to deal with it. It can't do it. Suddenly the whole engine in the head gets stuck. What do I do now? And then it's too late. It's happened already and you're dead or whatever it is. You didn't jump out of the way soon enough. And there the train was coming towards you. What do I do now? The train is coming. So in emergency situations, you cannot think. If you think, you're stuck. And so many people experience actually that the mind gets out of the way and something else, presence suddenly does. And this happens to people who engage in dangerous activities and love it, climbing up a steep wall, mountain wall, driving dangerous cars fast, motorbikes or whatever they do. Anything, any dangerous activity forces you into the present moment. You don't need that. And it could, of course, dangerous activity means it is dangerous. Don't get addicted to just one activity to take you into the present moment then, because then every weekend you'd have to climb up this wall. And in the meantime, of course, you're still not present. So if it's not an absolute emergency situation, but a challenge, then it's important. So that means you have a little bit of time to deal with it. Don't immediately go into thinking about it. So give it attention, face it, and now this giving of attention, which I sometimes call looking, but it's not, it might involve looking or it might not, is this clarity of consciousness with which you look at something as an entire situation and don't immediately come to a conclusion as to what action you need to take. So you go, it's that facing it and looking that connects you to a deeper level of challenge. In other words, you become still, alert and still. And then after a few seconds or a minute or two, it is likely that a thought comes in that tells you what the right action is. So that's not an emergency, it's just it's a challenge. Or it may be that you still don't know what to do, or it may be that you have to become still again after a while and look at it again. And then you may come to the realization that there's nothing you can do, at least for now. There are certain situations that are problematic, and yet, for now, there isn't really much you can do. And then you leave it alone. You accept this is what is, the acceptance of what is. So it happens very often when people are not able to really have that clarity of perception, looking at the situation. Often people take action when it would be better to leave it alone. Many situations, it depends of course what it is. Many situations are made far worse by taking unnecessary, superfluous, or excessive action. Balance in everything. There's a balance that you need to find. But the most important thing, challenges, accept them, even welcome them when they arise, because they're a great opportunity, especially the little ones. You might not welcome the big challenges, but they are great too. Don't resent the challenges. Get rid of the belief or transcend the belief that you should not be challenged by life, that these problems should not occur. Think about the movies, how boring a movie is. And not only the audience would go to sleep if nothing ever goes wrong in a movie, the characters would go to sleep too. And in the end, they're all asleep. And I use asleep not necessarily as actually asleep. You would, in the absence of challenges, your level of consciousness would decrease. So if you discover within yourself that a lot of the time you're in a state of lack, of insufficiency, of not enough, and you feel that the answer to, the remedy is to be active in this world and achieve and do as much as possible, then you'll probably find that ultimately that is not the answer to your state of lack. In order to transcend, to go beyond your state of lack, of neediness, of not enough, spiritual practice and spiritual realization is necessary. Focus on the realization of being. It's only there that you can go beyond that state of lack, which is ego. Go within and discover who or what you are beyond the person. Then there are other things that you do. As you know, I often recommend when you get into your car, maybe you do that already, you just mentioned something about the car. When you close the door of your car, give yourself 30 seconds to just be present. Unless it's an emergency, then you should go to the hospital or wherever you're going. So give yourself 30 seconds, but it has to be done in the right way. You're not saying, okay, Eckhart says 30 seconds, and then you say, okay, here we go. You're just straining to get out of the 30 seconds. So it has to be focused on your breath, for example, that helps, or the inner body, the awareness of the inner body, and practice the being. So you bring a little bit of being into the doing. Later, at some point later, the two will merge completely. And then there are other moments when you can probably, things that you do frequently every day, there you can bring in awareness so that it's not a means to an end. And perhaps create a little gap, so have a number of gaps during the day, during a busy day. You could say, for example, whenever you wash your hands in the bathroom, that can be an absolute presence and you come to your senses, feel the water, smell the soap, and that can be a present moment. Whatever, you can probably make a list of things that you do every day. If there's a staircase somewhere in your building, then walking up and down the stairs can be a wonderful opportunity for being present at every step. So it's not a means to an end anymore. So I would suggest make a list of things that you do every day or very often, and use these as to bring in spaces. So you have this very brief practices of bringing in spaces, and then even while you're engaged in the doing, there too you can see if you can, as we mentioned, the discussions that you have, sense the presence that you are while you're listening. Be alert. That you're actually then much more alert than you were in a normal state. It increases your intelligence, and it's an intelligence that's deeper than the IQ intelligence. That's something that I find in my life that arises because I also practice that, although I don't have discussions that often, but sometimes we meet. And this alert listening, out of that, what I find often comes is questions. You ask questions. One of the most creative ways of participating in a discussion group is to ask questions. Other people, when they say something, the light of your awareness shines on it. Then a question arises, and another question. This is in the creative process of finding solutions and answers. This is often overlooked by, especially when you're very much identified with your mind. Then the mind has certain preconceived notions and opinions and positions, and it'll just repeat those. So when somebody comes forward with an idea that's totally new, if you're very much identified with your mind, it could happen that you say, "Oh no, that's not going to work." But with this, you develop the ability to listen, and the true listening means you are alert and still. That's true listening. It's not the auditory aspect is a very small one. You're alert and still. And you may find that you may not have the answers, but you begin to ask questions. And then the other person who perhaps brought forward an idea is then forced to reply, and it may drive him or her deeper to see where can we go with this. So one of the most creative things, and the very creative people in that kind of environment, they are the ones who ask the most questions. This is how the entire philosophy of Socrates developed, because it's called the Socratic method, which is somebody comes and asks Socrates a question, but he has questions to him, and so he goes from one question to another and another. When you read Plato's account of Socrates, I don't think Plato completely understood what Socrates was doing. Plato thought that he already knew the answer, but I don't think that's the case, because Socrates said, "I'm the only one who knows that he knows nothing," which means he was comfortable with the state of not knowing that I mentioned earlier. And out of that state of not knowing, often questions arise. And in this question, then the answers suddenly come. It's a joint endeavor. The answer may not even necessarily come through you, but you ask the right questions, and then the group suddenly comes up with an answer. And that is also spiritual practice, and it can be totally incorporated into what you're doing. So both setting aside little spaces when you become present during the day, and also then in many areas, maybe the hardest is being on the computer screen, to be present there. But there you could practice as much as possible. Have a little reminder next to the laptop, whatever it is, and have a little reminder to, for example, to be in your body, have inner body awareness, because computer draws your attention out. You go. It actually depletes you if you, after a few hours. it depletes you of energy, it flows out, it absorbs, because all your focus is on there. And so it's doubly important to, you may not sustain it continuously, but have a little reminder. So even while you are writing something or reading something, and this is something that you may not succeed immediately in this practice, but it is possible to be aware of your body, have some background awareness in the energy field of the inner body, and then you sit and you can still deal with whatever it is you're dealing with.
I've known all the things that you've talked about in many of your books, and well, it's 2 books, but the books I've read. I've experienced this presence through music, and it's a very profound sense of grace that I feel when I know I'm being played. In a sense, I'm an instrument. And in a way, what we call instruments are voices. So I've been very taken with this description and imagery I've had from what you've discussed about being near the void. Because that's what it feels like. It's something comes up. I know there's something in there. We've been talking about dogs a lot. It's like I smell it inside. And it can become obsessive because it's such a beautiful presence. But I mean, I think of Stravinsky. He said, "The Rite of Spring." He said, "I did not write The Rite of Spring. I transcribed it." Some artists get these things, and the clarity is there. What I experience is mostly an inference or something that needs to be embodied and brought forth. And that which my experience is more of knowing what it isn't. I just play it. As it moves through me, I can sense that grace, especially when I don't feel my hands. I don't feel anything. I just feel this presence, this music that's just as surprising to me as anyone else. And I'm really fortunate because I never took lessons and never got trained or anything, so my mind doesn't really get that involved. Don't ask me to play Happy Birthday, though. I don't know how to do that. So I guess my question was about this connection to the creative and, in a sense, the artifacts that come. I use the word inform, and when I was thinking of, does art and music inform the ego of presence? That was really what was. Okay. And so how does one be part of that manifestation but not get too involved, to keep the distance so one doesn't become too obsessed with that process? So the balance of the two, that's what I'm looking for.
Thank you. Well, of course, on the one hand, you have the creative process of music or art, and then you have the finished product, and then you have the piece of music is being played and somebody listens to it, or the work of art is there and somebody contemplates it. When you ask, can art or music inform the ego of presence? Well, first of all, the ego doesn't know anything about presence, so it can't do that. And there needs to be some opening in the ego in order to be receptive to the power that is latent in music or art that was created from that deep place. There's a lot of music and art that's not necessarily created from that deep place, but the ego is trying to be clever, and so it tries to come up with something clever, and then that's fine. But let's talk about some piece of music or work of art that has come out of
connectedness with the stillness or the presence. So some of that then, to some extent, the work of art or the piece of music still carries that energy field. So it can put the listener in touch, or the person who contemplates the work of art can put that person in touch with the deeper dimension within, as long as there's even a little bit of opening is required. If there's only the density of the ego, then the transformational possibilities of art or music are not realized. So a little bit of opening is required in the viewer or the listener, and then can be quite a wonderful thing to listen to music or to contemplate a work of art and be transported, if only for a moment, into that alert stillness out of which it originally came. It's a beautiful thing. Another aspect of your question is, I believe, losing oneself, perhaps going too deep, almost losing yourself in the ground out of which creativity comes, or in the creative process. There's always a balance that is needed so that you don't lose yourself in being. It could happen to an artist, it can happen to some people who awaken spiritually and they suddenly plunge so deeply into being that they lose all interest in doing. So that happened to some spiritual masters who spent several years in being without doing anything. For example, Ramana Maharshi in India, who had to be fed for several years because he wouldn't even pick up food. He was so deeply immersed in being, he just sat there, and people recognized something extraordinary about him, which they wouldn't have done in the West. In the West, he would have been a medical problem. They recognized something extraordinary, and they put food in his mouth. But there was a loss of balance, certainly, he could no longer function in this world. This, of course, to such an extreme, this does not happen to you. You're still here. And then gradually, after a few years, he gradually was beginning to function again in this world, and then gradually was able to regain a balance between dealing with things out here and connectedness with being. In a slightly minor way, it happened to me when I lost interest completely in doing and drifted around for 2 years. It wasn't a problem to me. It was only a problem to people who were watching me or who knew me. So there was a loss of balance for a while, but then gradually the balance reestablished itself. I didn't have a teacher as such, so it had to be a natural process. So not to go so deep that as long as you go within and then give form to that which was resting in the formless, be used by it so that through you it can come into this world of form. Don't stay down there and lose yourself in it, not necessary. So what do you compose music? Yes. Well, that's a wonderful way of getting in touch with the stillness within any creative process. Anybody who is I don't, unfortunately. The world has not given me that gift of being able to either play music or have some kind of art to bring into this world for a reason, because the world also needs direct spiritual teaching. And so I love listening to certain kinds of music. For the viewer, it's important not to become dependent, however, on anything external to enter the state of presence. So whereas music can be a help, there too needs to be a balance. If the only place you can become still is when you listen to certain kinds of music, then that's not quite it, because you're becoming dependent on something external to get in touch with that. So use it as a help, and this is the same as a spiritual teacher or spiritual teaching. It can be a great help to listen to a tape or to see a video or whatever, great help. But if you become totally dependent on that or on a group, also a group can be a great help. To sit with a group of people in an energy field of presence can be a great help. But not becoming dependent on the group either, not becoming dependent on one teacher, any external teacher. And every good teacher will tell you, when the time comes, enough is enough. The true teacher is within you. And what you see in me, that which you find so precious in me, must be in you, otherwise you wouldn't see it. So the good teacher will always direct you back into yourself, will not foster any kind of dependency. So knowing what is a help, using it, any of the things that can be helpful, but not becoming dependent. Eventually it is necessary for you to go there without any help, still being able to appreciate even teachers and teachings. I love listening to other spiritual teachers if they come from a deep place. I have great joy when I listen. Wow, this is so wonderful. or reading a spiritual book that comes from the deepest place. There's still great joy in that. It's nothing to do with needing. It's enjoying a slightly different expression of the same deep truth. Just wonderful. And then also you can see it wherever it is, no matter in what form it's hiding. You can see the truth shining through wherever it is hiding. It might be hiding in some ancient religion, hiding very deeply. And there you see it shining through there may be a lot of mythology around it, there may be a lot of cultural beliefs around it, and yet deep down there you can still see, this is the truth, shining through all the mythology around it and so on. So once it's in there, you see it everywhere, but primarily it is who you are. So I wish you well, and be thankful that you have this wonderful gift.
To meditate successfully, the idea that you're doing a meditation can be quite an obstacle. So maybe that's the first thing we can get rid of tonight. The preconceptions and the expectations that come with that term. So why did we call it guided meditation? Well, we had to use some word to get you here. Meditation is usually something that you do among many other things. Doing implies all kinds of things. It implies time, even future to some extent. And yet, true meditation, if you even want to call it that, and it's better not to call it anything, is not to do with doing. It's not a doing. It's the realization that you are, of being, which underlies all doing, is prior to all doing. Thoughts, emotions is prior to that. The simple realization, not the realization who you are, because there can be so many perspectives on that. Not the realization how you fit into the totality of the cosmos, how that seemingly little life, fleeting existence fits into the totality somewhere. Not realizing how I fit into the whole. It's impossible to comprehend. But an alignment with the totality without the need to mentally understand anything. A realization, the simple realization that you are, which is expressed in the sublime words, I am. And if you've missed elementary grammar at school, you might not realize that I am is the first person singular of the verb to be. You think it's two completely different words. The realization that you are not as a concept, but as a deeper sensing of the life that you are. The aliveness, the life. And something helpful to realize that is to pretend for one moment that there is no past and no future. Shh. 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 I'm saying pretend so that everybody is still with me. If I said there is no past and future, some of you might suddenly start thinking, just a second, aren't you going to sign books in an hour? And the moment you go into thinking, you're off into the realm of mind, the realm of things, objects in consciousness. Every thought is an object in consciousness, and every thought has a pulling power. So it arises, and it pulls your attention in, and you start thinking, okay, but I came here half an hour ago, there must be a past. Not realizing, of course, when you came here, it was the present moment. And when the books are going to be signed, it'll be the present moment, because there is nothing else. Okay, but no need to believe that. Let's pretend. Let's pretend for a moment that there is no past and future. Okay. Or let's just say past and future become peripheral to who you are. There's only this. Oh. That is the entry point into the realization, I am. Well, in business you set certain goals that you want to achieve, and then you take action towards achieving those goals. And in the meantime, there's a lot of interaction with other people who are also working as a team with you, and there's probably also perhaps interaction with other business organizations. So first of all, the goal setting and the journey towards achieving particular goals that the organization has set itself. Once you have a goal, you will find as you pursue your goal as a team together, continuously obstacles arise as you go towards it. Whenever you create something new, you will find it is rarely a very smooth progression. You have to overcome obstacles on the way in the form of people or situations that go wrong. This doesn't work, or try something else. The important thing is not to place an excessive emphasis on the achievement, which is the desired outcome, but to be as present in the doing as you can, so that the doing does not become stressful. Almost every business people who are working in it are under stress, I believe. There may be some that are not, but stress is not the way in which you want to conduct your business, because the environment is toxic. A stressful environment is toxic. So when you can always tell, is the goal something that is for the greater good, or is it an ego-inspired goal? Are you looking? This applies both in a business environment, and it applies equally when you have personal goals. It's the same process is involved. When an obstacle arises, to immediately face the obstacle, which comes in the form of a situation, something not working, something going wrong, somebody trying to sabotage you, perhaps from some other organization, who knows what happens, to never react against the obstacle as if this should not be happening, to immediately to face it and see what is the way beyond it. How can I either dissolve it, bypass it, or use it? What is, so that you don't enter a state of reactivity when obstacles appear on your path. That's important for anybody who pursues a goal. What is your relationship to difficulties and obstacles that arise as you travel towards your goal? And the only conscious way of dealing with obstacles is not to react as if these obstacles should not be happening. So you have to look into what your relationship is with arising obstacles on your path. And this is not just in business, but anyway. The unconscious person in business or elsewhere gets upset, angry, aggressive, despondent, very stressed every time something isn't going the way they want it to go. And immediately dysfunctional inner states arise. And therefore they experience, there are companies where the entire environment is toxic because everybody lives in that way. And in ego is also a thing that arises. As much as possible, be aware so that you don't seek ego satisfaction in the doing. There's a personal ego, then one person can sabotage another person in the same company because you are not free of ego identification. So it's very important to be aware so that you do not seek ego satisfaction through what you are doing. Be present in what you do so that the doing becomes joyful rather than placing so much focus on what you want to achieve that the journey becomes very stressful. Then nothing is worth achieving if the journey is stressful. You might, let's say you spent a year or 2 years with some scheme that you want, a new business model or whatever it is. What is the state of consciousness, the collective state of consciousness while you are traveling towards your goal? Is it stressed? Is it stressful? Is there a lot of conflict? Or is it a common enterprise? And is the doing joyful? And it can only be joyful if you place more importance in what you're doing in this present moment than attempting to arrive at some future point. You know where you want to go to, but as the Bhagavad Gita says, do not be too attached to the outcome. Then it's much more likely that the outcome will be good. But if you have an excessive attachment, you need to achieve that. If you have an excessive attachment to outcome, then the journey becomes very stressful. That's something that is important. And I'm talking not from personal experience because I'm not in business, but I have spoken to people, quite a few, who are in the business environment. And so I've been to some relatively conscious companies. They invited me. Of course, unconscious companies wouldn't invite me. And I have spoken to them, and I'm surprised that these conscious companies actually, it's a joy to be there for all the, do the employees, whoever they are, or your partners, do they enjoy being there? That is vital. Sounds very simple. Or are they so focused on some kind of extra achievement that the doing is not enjoyable at all? Do they love being there? what is the relationship with you and your colleagues, partners? And those things are vitally important. And I don't know how many employees you have. Again, it's important to make the environment as pleasant for them as possible.
First of all, I want to thank you and Eckhart for everything that you've given me and are giving me now. It's so greatly appreciated. I'm not sure if it's a question, but I need a response from you to clarify. It deals with a pain body and challenges, overcoming challenges, transcending challenges. And then I think I heard you say this morning, I heard Eckhart say yesterday, the good news is we don't have to suffer. So, 5 years ago, coming up to 5 years, my son died. And I went through, he died suddenly. So it was, and he also was my best friend. So it was I can't even think about the suffering that I went through at that time. You know, it's just like, it was, I wailed, I cried, and for months, I just went there, and that suffering, that pain, and that broken heart was torn apart. And I remember, to the point I was crawling on the ground down, I have a place down by the sea, and I was there, and he loved that place, and we spent many wonderful times there together. And I was crawling on the ground and crying, and I heard him say to me, "Dad, stop that." And that came to me, a shift happened. It was a change there. Of course, I've transcended it, and I've overcome it, not completely. I never will overcome that completely, I don't think. But what I want clarification from you on is I don't really believe, I don't fully understand that one can transcend, overcome, or have a choice in certain situations concerning that type of suffering. So there's where I'm wondering, when you say we don't have to suffer, we do have a choice. I'm saying it's not been my experience in that case.
You know, as I said earlier, and what Eckhart says is suffering is our greatest teacher. So the suffering is teaching you. And you already know that in order to go beyond that suffering, that's the evolution of human consciousness through you. So consciousness is awakening through you. So not to say that I almost see you and sense that in order to hold on to the memory of your son, that the fear of letting go of the suffering will somehow get you be less connected to your son. Yeah. And that's not the case, and that's what your son was saying to you. You don't have to. You don't have to suffer. Because you will be actually more connected to your son without the suffering being there.
Yeah, in a way, he tells me that.
Yeah. Yeah, he's telling you that.
Yeah.
And he's saying to you, Dad, you don't have to suffer. I'm right here.
Well, could you say that again, please?
You're what?
Tell me that I'm going to be more connected with my son by not suffering.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the suffering is just getting in the way for that real connection of, not of the form. The form is gone. Every form will pass away, but what is left behind is the essence And that true essence lives in you. Your son and you are no different. It's the same essence. So you're going to be more connected to yourself, which is also your son. And that's the gift through his death that he's leaving you. Is that space, that empty space, that void that he's leaving behind for you to go deeper into
Well, you
yourself.
know, it explains, when I go to his grave these days, I don't feel that suffering, I feel peace. So that's a wonderful gift. I know he gives me those gifts, and he's more present in a very positive way, in almost a jovial way. You know, because I'm trying to communicate with him. Sometimes he just laughs at my way of making efforts to communicate with him, more or less saying, I'm right beside you, kind of thing, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
It's right here. It's all right here.
Thank you very much.
I have to share this story, this last story, because when Maya, our dog, passed away last September, and a few months before that, my father passed away. And actually, Maya was kind of in that very critical mode, even when my father was passing, and it was like, who's going to go first? That sort of thing. And it was obvious my father was going first, and I said to my father, you know, Maya's going to come right after you soon after. Will you greet her? And when Maya, she died at home in my arms, and when she was passing away in my arms, I felt my father's presence come. And then I felt them both there, joyful. It was just like they were so happy. And it was just like, wow, this is incredible. And it brought such peace and such joy. There was just absolutely no fear, nothing. I just felt this incredible sense of joy. And I knew that joy was emanating from the essence of who they were. And it was just absolutely so beautiful, you know, and they're still there. I could still feel them. When they passed, and when because my father passed first, I was able to touch into that empty voice, that void of just, I remember being in, getting ready to change and in my closet and just like, wow, I miss him, and that emptiness. And then I went into that emptiness, and suddenly there was this tremendous peace there. And it was just like, wow, that emptiness is God itself. And we are God itself through the form. And eventually all forms, as they always do, leave, and it leaves you with emptiness, which is really your God nature, which is God. You're left with God. And he's saying, you're left with God. Don't hold on to the suffering anymore, because the suffering and the attachment to the form is keeping you stuck. It's keeping you further away from God. And God is all around us, right here, right now, through every living being, nature, and yet beyond all of that, beyond the form. It's just here, and the forms pop up. But yet, stillness is here. God is here. That little space that Eckhart talked about all of a sudden became big. That's how it works. You take that little space and you go right into that space, and soon enough that space just There is more space in this universe than there are stars in the sky. And how beautiful it is that we get to witness the stars and have the experience of our children, of our parents, even though they can bring us to unconsciousness sometimes. But saying all that, when they're on their deathbed, do you think about that? Well, sometimes you do if you're in the grip still of the pain body, but as we begin to awaken, we tap into something else that we begin to see right through their own pain. Because that pain that they feel is no different than our own. And we know if we can transcend the pain within ourselves, so too, when we look then at the other in their pain, we don't see them only as pain, only as their pain body, in other words. We see the essence of who they are. And the pain body is just a temporary thing. We'll get these gifts, and as we become older and older, the things and the people around us pass on, and we're left with this emptiness. And in that emptiness, you can say is also fullness, because you are one with God. You've merged with the essence of who you are, and you don't feel that emptiness. You become filled with peace, with love, with joy. Thank you.
So that is the presence that has no form, that is a something opens up within you that is very deep and far transcends your form identity. It connects you with something vast. It's not even something. It connects you with a great depth. And therefore I often use the analogy of the ripple on the surface of the ocean. And every human being is that ripple in this analogy. As long as the ripple is not aware of its true nature, it only knows itself as a little ripple. And it looks to other ripples for fulfillment, or it wants to protect itself from other ripples and compete with them, or compares itself to other ripples. It's a very problematic existence because it only knows the surface of reality. It's an entire
experiencing entire reality as a surface phenomenon, and continuously trying to find some kind of ultimate fulfillment, happiness on the surface level through other ripples or other situations that are also ripples. And it's frustrating to live as a ripple because you're just this little thing, and some ripples manage to get bigger. They might gobble up a few others, and then they grow into a wave. In this analogy, it means you have your private jet waiting nearby. That's a clear sign that you have grown into a wave. You're no longer just a little ripple. But you're just as short-lived as the ripple. And now you have to compete with other big waves, so it becomes problematic again. And a moment may come when the ripple or the wave suddenly perhaps becomes frustrated with that surface existence and says, is that all there is? That I can't take anymore, because obstacles continuously arise, and there's always things that are unfulfilling, and even the most promising things that you enter into, relationships, situations, places, all kinds of, even the most promising things, there's always, sooner or later, some flaw appears in it. What's wrong with the world? Why is there always this ultimate fulfillment is always kind of short-lived? Because you're still on the surface only. And then the moment comes, and perhaps accidentally, or because another ripple close to you, who has gone beyond its mere ripple existence, says something, or you can sense something, and then perhaps for a moment there's a cessation in the stream of thinking without loss of consciousness, and the ripple goes, the ripple goes, oh, there's more to me than I thought. It doesn't know what it is, it doesn't have a name for it, but it can sense a depth suddenly. And as it senses the depth, that is suddenly the vertical dimension has come in. It's no longer just the horizontal dimension, there's the vertical dimension of consciousness, where there's only the present moment. Past and future exists on the vertical dimension of reality, and there's a transcendent reality, there's the vertical dimension. And the ripple suddenly discovers that it is a manifestation, a temporary manifestation of something vast. And it is not separate from it, it is a manifestation of it. So it's no longer just a little ripple. It senses its origin. In Buddhism and sometimes in Zen, you have strange expressions, your true face, before you were born, all kinds of expressions to point to it. It discovers that it is the ocean, or it probably doesn't have a name for ocean. It discovers its connectedness to something
transcendent, that transcends the ripple existence, and then gradually that's the first discovery, and then it occasionally loses it again, but gradually it is able to have some attention in that depth, even when it is occupied with its surface ripple existence and operates there. It does that, and yet there is a depth, there's a rootedness in being, and that transforms the way in which the ripple, we'll let go of the ripple in a moment. As you know, the ripple is you. The ripple existence then becomes no longer as problematic as it was before, a little bit more sane. The dysfunction that has created an enormous amount of unnecessary suffering, the reactivity that amplified every challenge that the ripple encountered in life, that amplified it and made a huge thing, and then through reactivity, that challenge actually grew even worse because you amplified it. Well, the ripple, sorry, it's not. The ripple amplified it. It's easier we can bypass the remnants of ego in you by talking about ripples, and then the ego doesn't feel offended. That's the power of parables and stories. So the ego doesn't realize that it's about me. So it listens to a story, and whereas before the ego would have created a barrier without knowing. It's a little bit like a sugar-coated pill. So you give to a child, and it tastes good, and then you swallow it, and then it begins to work. I believe it's called the red pill. We'll have some questions, but before, I'll just read 2 or 3 questions that people have been sending in questions, people who are watching us, who are with us, but elsewhere in time, in space, and eventually in time too, except that it's always the present moment. So time ultimately is an illusion, but on a conventional level, we talk about time. So I forgot to say hello to everybody who is not physically present here, but present somewhere else on the planet. This question has been asked in the past a few times. It tends to come up very often, so it is a question that quite a few people have. If we live with a person who is unconscious a lot of the time, is it possible to have a harmonious relationship whether the person totally awakens or not? That seems to be a recurring problem for many people. Now, if you have brought your unconscious partner here, that means, and he or she actually came along, that means not all is lost. If he or she is still here. So it depends in what way the unconsciousness of the person that you live with manifests. There are many ways in which it can manifest, from being in negative states and misinterpreting what you say or do, anger, and then it goes up on the scale, verbal abuse, and then it goes higher up on the scale of unconsciousness to physical abuse. So if the unconsciousness is not too high up on that level of intensity, it may be possible to live with a person who may not share not only share your interest in spiritual evolution, but have no idea what you are practicing or reading or talking about. If you try to point something out, that person may just be uninterested. And then if you go up on the scale of unconsciousness, then another person may be hostile towards what you're doing. And there's a big difference. In both cases, there's unconsciousness. Your partner may just have no idea what it is, but say, well, yeah, go listen to that guy Eckhart. I don't know why you go there, but that's okay, I'll be fine. That's fine. So you can live with that person. And then another one gets angry. Says, why do you always have to see, I can't stand it anymore, or whatever, criticize. So you might be able to live with that too. What you can live with, only you can know whether you can continue your presence practice and bring surrender into the situation with this person. And miracles are possible. Miracles do happen. And sometimes the seemingly most unconscious person can suddenly shift. Now, if that person is very unconscious, usually what is required is some blow, not you physically doing it. I'm speaking metaphorically. Life administers some blow in the form of big loss, accident, illness, and then deeply unconscious people who are very much trapped in their ego can sometimes suddenly open up. The ego gets cracked. You may sometimes observe that when a person with a big ego is unconscious, it happens not to everybody. It's when they become ill, they're lying in bed, they're ill. Sometimes the ego gets even stronger, it seems, but for some people, the ego, there isn't enough energy left to keep the ego going. In that, because the illness absorbs so much energy, so there's not enough energy for, and suddenly this person who was never a genuine person that you couldn't talk to heart because there was always egoic posturing and egoic role playing there, and suddenly this person is ill, lying in bed, and there just isn't enough energy for posturing and role playing, and then for the first time, I've observed it a few times, people have told me and have personally observed, for the first time you can communicate with that person at a deeper level of presence. This can also happen when people who had a huge ego all throughout their lives, when they're approaching death. Sometimes miracles of transformation can happen in the last moments, in the last days, or in the last weeks of a person's life, when resentments that had been building up over a lifetime and other narratives of an extremely negative nature are let go of, can happen. It can also happen when a person is ill, that when this person recovers, that shift that you observed doesn't last, and the moment strength returns to that person, the old egoic patterns are back. And it's like, oh my God, you're your old self again. You were so nice when you were ill. Loving and present and open. Well, just wait. Things will happen again. So if there's abuse, and these are more pronounced manifestations of unconsciousness, if there's verbal abuse, can you live with such a person? Only you can know whether you're prepared to do that, whether you can sustain your presence practice, perhaps not. Physical abuse, if you stay with physical abuse in the hope that this person will become transformed, that is probably a delusion. But I cannot tell you what to do. But if you are alert and vigilant and observe yourself in the presence of that person, you will know what to do. You just have to see that the right course of action is not being sabotaged by certain patterns that remain in your mind. Mental, emotional patterns, such as fear of being alone, fear, loss of security, perhaps the security of being with another person, even if it's fear of the unknown, stepping into the unknown. So you may be held back by certain patterns in your mind, and if you're present enough, you can recognize that and then go beyond it.